Today's video is sponsored by Babbel, the #1 language learning app in the world. One side of my family speaks Dutch, and when they start speaking Dutch, I never know what they're talking about. I'm always a little paranoid that they might be talking about me. So I thought it'd be fun to surprise them by learning to speak Dutch. So I've been using Babbel, and I love it. Babbel is way better than other apps or learning methods. Babbel teaches you language for real life, so it's stuff you use in everyday encounters. The lessons were created by people who have experience teaching languages, whereas other apps use algorithms and AI to create their lessons. Babbel's lessons start off easy and progressively get more difficult. But the more lessons you do, the more confident you get, so you won't get discouraged. The lessons are a lot of fun, and I always look forward to doing the next one. And if you watch my videos, you know I struggle with English, which is my native tongue. So if I can use Babbel to learn a different language, then anyone can. For a limited time, Babbel is offering criminally listed viewers 50% off a 6-month subscription. Just click on the link in the description box below this video. Babbel is the beste maniera om een nieuwe taal te leren. Download Babbel today so you can start learning a new language, and you'll also be supporting criminally listed in the process. Number 3. Danny Lockin. Joseph and Jean Lockin were married on Halloween in 1937 in Nashua, Iowa. Shortly after they were wed, they moved to Honolulu, Hawaii because Joseph had gotten a job running a pineapple plantation for Dole. Jean had been a professional dancer who had performed in New York City at the tail end of the vaudeville era. Jean gave birth to a son named Daniel on July 13, 1943. Daniel, who everyone called Danny, would be their only child. In 1946, the family moved to Plattsville, Nebraska, before settling in Omaha, Nebraska. In Omaha, Jean opened a dance studio. From a young age, Danny danced, sang, and acted. He became a professional performer when he was just 8 years old. Danny and another boy his age, Neil Reynolds, performed together under the name The Two Checkers. They performed comedy routines, did impressions, sang, and danced. The Two Checkers performed together for several years. In 1959, when Daniel was 16, his family moved to Anaheim, California to help further his entertainment career. After moving to Anaheim, Danny got some small, uncredited roles in movies like Gypsy starring Rosalind Russell and Natalie Wood, and The Stripper starring Joanne Woodward. He also landed a small part in the TV show My Three Sons. Danny also auditioned for the role of Rolf in The Sound of Music. He was seriously considered, but he ultimately did not get the part. After Danny graduated from high school, he moved to New York City to try his hand at stage acting. He landed supporting roles in several plays, including Gypsy and The Sound of Music. In 1966, he was cast as Barnaby Tucker in Hello, Dolly. In 1968, the musical was made into a movie starring Barbra Streisand. Danny was cast in the role of Barnaby Tucker. After the movie was released in December 1969, Danny continued to portray the role of Barnaby on Broadway. He did this role for about a year. Danny's portrayal of Barnaby on both stage and screen was the peak of his career. When Danny was 28, he moved back to Anaheim, where he taught dance at his mother's dance studio. The studio closed in early 1977, so Danny started teaching at another studio. On Friday, August 20th, 1977, Danny competed on NBC's The Gong Show. He and his partner did a song and dance routine. They ended up tying for first place. The next night, Saturday, August 21st, Danny went to a gay bar in Garden Grove, California. Danny had been married to a woman, but they divorced after 2 years. He was never really open about his sexuality, but it's believed he was bisexual. At the time, Danny lived with his mother. His father had passed away over 16 years earlier. Danny did not come home that night, but his mother wasn't worried because sometimes he stayed out all night. After all, he was a 34-year-old man. But when he didn't come home on Sunday night, she became worried and she called the police. It turned out that on Saturday night, Danny went to the apartment of 34-year-old Charles Hopkins. Hopkins had worked as a medical clerk, but at that time, he was unemployed. On that Sunday afternoon, Hopkins called the police and told them that there was a dead body in his apartment. The police arrived and they found the dead body of a man who had suffered nearly 100 stab wounds. The body had also been mutilated after death. The man had no identification on him. 2 days later, the body was identified as 34-year-old Daniel Lockin. The police discovered his identity after they ran his fingerprints through the system. Danny had previously been arrested for driving under the influence, and that's when the police got his fingerprints. Charles Hopkins had an unusual explanation for what happened on the night Danny died. Hopkins admitted that Danny came back to his apartment after the bar. At the apartment, they had a drink together. Hopkins said he wasn't attracted to Danny and decided not to pursue any sexual relations. He said that Danny asked him for some money, but he didn't give him any. Danny then left the apartment. Hopkins said that after Danny left, he went to bed. He claimed he woke up a short time later, and as he was walking out of his bedroom, he was hit on the head. Hopkins claimed he lost consciousness and woke up several hours later. When he regained consciousness, he found Danny's dead body in the bathroom. Hopkins said he moved the body into the living room and then cleaned up the washroom. Afterward, he cleaned up the living room. He then went swimming and got his clothes ready for the next day. It was only after he did all those activities that he called the police. Hopkins was asked how Danny ended up being stabbed 100 times in his apartment. Hopkins said he wasn't sure, but he had 2 theories. He thought it was possible that Danny broke in and hit him on the head. Hopkins said that after he was hit on the head, his body might have gone into autopilot and he defended himself. But he doubted that theory himself. He said a more likely scenario was that Danny had an accomplice with him when he broke into his apartment, and the accomplice killed Danny after he lost consciousness. The police searched Hopkins' apartment and they found a book. It was full of violent pornography that featured pictures of men being tortured. Charles Hopkins' trial started in May 1978, but it had to be delayed because his lawyer suffered a leg injury. His trial resumed in late July 1978. Hopkins was ultimately found guilty of voluntary manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 4 years of prison. With good behavior, he would have only had to serve 2 years. After Charles Hopkins served his sentence, he stayed out of the public eye. He supposedly died in 2006 from natural causes. Number 2. Rebecca Schaeffer. Rebecca Schaeffer was born in Eugene, Oregon in November 1967. Not long after she was born, her family moved to Portland, Oregon. Her father was a child psychologist and her mother was a writer and college instructor. When Rebecca was young, she wanted to be a rabbi when she grew up. But by the time she got into her teens, she found herself interested in a much different career, modeling. In 1984, when Schaeffer was 17 years old, she moved to New York City alone to pursue her modeling career. In New York, she got work as an actress, appearing in the soap opera Guiding Light in a small, uncredited role. Schaeffer struggled to get work as a model because she was only 5'7", and models are usually taller. But she continued to find acting work. In 1985, she had a small, ongoing role on the soap opera One Life to Live. She also got a small role in the movie Radio Days, which was written and directed by Woody Allen. While these roles were small, they did help her land one of the lead roles on the CBS sitcom My Sister Sam. The show is about a woman named Sam, played by Pam Dauber, who lives in San Francisco, California, and works as a photographer. One day, her 16-year-old sister, Patty, which was Schaeffer's role, shows up and lives with her. The show debuted in October 1986, and it was a moderate hit. One person who watched the show was 16-year-old Robert John Bardo, who lived in Tucson, Arizona. Bardo was the youngest of 7 children, and he was considered a loner. Bardo's family was highly dysfunctional. Bardo later claimed that one of his brothers physically and emotionally abused him. When Bardo was 13, he became obsessed with Samantha Smith, a child peace activist. In November 1982, Samantha wrote to Yuri Andropov, the new leader of the Soviet Union. She congratulated him on being the leader and encouraged him to be peaceful with the United States. Andropov was touched by Samantha's letter, so he wrote a letter back. In the letter, he invited Samantha to visit the Soviet Union. The correspondence between the 10-year-old American girl and the leader of the Soviet Union was big news in both countries. Samantha traveled to the Soviet Union in July 1983. Sadly, Samantha was killed in a plane crash in August 1985 when she was 13. When Bardo was 13 and became obsessed with Samantha, she was 11. He wrote a letter to her and she wrote back. 13-year-old Bardo ended up stealing money from his mother and getting on a bus to Maine to go look for Samantha. He was found by juvenile authorities before he could contact Samantha. After Bardo was in custody, he stabbed himself with a pen. Back at school, Bardo's teachers noted that he was a disturbed young man. He wrote letters to a teacher, and sometimes he wrote multiple letters a day. The letters clearly show that Bardo was detached from reality. He often wrote about death. This included his own death from suicide and murdering the teacher. He would sign off the letters with the names of fictional characters like Dirty Harry Callahan and James Bond. His teachers told his parents he should get psychiatric help. Bardo went to counseling for about a week, and then his parents put a stop to it. In the summer of 1985, when Bardo was 15, he was hospitalized because of his psychiatric problems. His parents pulled him out of the hospital after a month. That autumn, despite getting straight A's all the way through high school, Bardo dropped out of school. He then became a janitor at a fast food restaurant. By the time Robert John Bardo was 16, he had not had a girlfriend or even gone on a date. When he saw Rebecca Schaeffer on My Sister Sam, he was immediately enamored with her because he thought she was pure and innocent. He ended up writing several letters to Schaeffer. She responded to one and wrote that she appreciated his letter because it was nice and it seemed real. She signed off, "Love, Rebecca." She also sent him an autographed photo. After receiving the letter and the photo, Bardo felt that he and Schaeffer were connected. Bardo traveled to Los Angeles twice and went to the Warner Brothers studio lot where My Sister Sam was being shot. Both times he was turned away by security and he returned to Tucson. My Sister Sam ended up being renewed for a second season, but due to low ratings, it was cancelled in April 1988, halfway through the second season. When the show went off the air, Bardo's obsession with Schaeffer seemed to weaken. Instead, he became obsessed with pop singers Tiffany and Debbie Gibson. After My Sister Sam, Schaeffer got a small role in the movie Scenes from the Class Struggle in Beverly Hills. It was released in July 1989. One person who saw the movie was 19-year-old Robert John Bardo. Bardo was mortified by Schaeffer's role in the movie. She appeared in a love scene, and this shattered the illusion that Bardo had about her, that she was pure and innocent. He decided to kill Schaeffer, and he made plans to murder her. He also started sending her dark and threatening letters. Bardo also wrote letters to Mark David Chapman, who was in prison for shooting John Lennon to death in December 1980. Chapman wrote 2 letters to Bardo, but then he stopped corresponding because he thought Bardo's letters were disturbing. Bardo also started researching a man named Arthur Jackson. Jackson had lived in Aberdeen, Scotland. He became obsessed with an actress named Teresa Saldana after seeing her in the movies Defiance and Raging Bull. Jackson came up with an elaborate plan on how to find out where Saldana lived. He hired a private investigator who found out Saldana's mother's phone number. Jackson then called Saldana's mother and he said he was the assistant to director Martin Scorsese and he asked for her daughter's address so he could send her a script. Saldana's mother unwillingly gave the address to Jackson. Jackson traveled from Aberdeen to Los Angeles. He attacked Saldana with a knife in front of her home. A delivery man stopped the attack. Saldana suffered 10 stab wounds. She spent 4 months in the hospital, but ultimately she survived. Jackson was sentenced to 12 years of prison for attempted murder. His sentence was later reduced to 6 years for good behavior. But then, just before Jackson was about to be paroled in 1990, it was revealed that while he was in prison, he sent threatening letters to Saldana and the delivery man who rescued her. For sending the threatening letters, Jackson was sentenced to another 5 years and 8 months in prison. He was released from prison in 1996, but he was immediately extradited to England. It turned out that in 1967, Jackson had robbed a bank in Chelsea. During the robbery, he shot and killed 33-year-old Anthony Fletcher. In January 1997, Jackson pleaded guilty to manslaughter and he was sent to a psychiatric hospital. Arthur Jackson died in the psychiatric hospital in 2004 at the age of 68. Robert John Bardo was inspired by how Jackson figured out where Teresa Saldana lived. Bardo ended up paying a private detective $250 to find out Rebecca Schaeffer's home address. He told the private detective that Schaeffer was his long-lost friend. On July 17, 1989, 19-year-old Robert John Bardo traveled from Tucson to Los Angeles. The next morning, Bardo went to 21-year-old Rebecca Schaeffer's apartment building. He pressed the buzzer to her apartment. Schaeffer's intercom was broken, so she came downstairs. Later that same day, Schaeffer was supposed to meet with director Francis Ford Coppola to read for a part in The Godfather Part 3. She was expecting a script that was supposed to be delivered that morning. Instead, when she got downstairs, she found Bardo, who was a stranger to her. Bardo told Schaeffer he was her biggest fan. He also showed her the letter and the autographed picture she had sent him. Schaeffer told Bardo to leave and not to come back to her home. They shook hands and Bardo walked away. He went to a diner where he had breakfast. Rebecca went back to her apartment and started getting ready for her meeting with Coppola. Bardo returned to Schaeffer's apartment building at 10:15 a.m. Once again, he pressed her buzzer and Schaeffer came downstairs. Then, 19-year-old Robert John Bardo shot 21-year-old Rebecca Schaeffer point blank in the chest with a .357 Magnum. Bardo watched Rebecca as she laid on the ground bleeding from the gunshot wound. Rebecca said, "Why? Why?" A neighbor who heard the gunshot came out of their apartment. They saw Rebecca on the ground and Bardo standing over her. Bardo then took off running. As he ran, he threw away a book he was carrying. It was Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. It was the same book that Mark David Chapman was carrying when he killed John Lennon. Schaeffer was rushed to the hospital. But half an hour after arriving at the hospital, Schaeffer was pronounced dead. After murdering the 21-year-old actress, Bardo took a bus back to Tucson. The next day, Bardo was arrested as he was wandering around an interstate in Tucson. It appeared that he was trying to get hit by a car. Once Bardo was in custody, he confessed to the murder of Rebecca Schaeffer. Bardo went to trial in September 1991. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. His trial lasted for 5 weeks. He was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without the chance of parole. At the time of this video, Robert John Barno is incarcerated at the Avenel State Prison in Avenel, California. The murder of Rebecca Schaeffer led to stricter stalking laws and privacy laws in California. Number 1. Judith Barsi. In the mid-1970s, Maria Viravas was working as a waitress at a restaurant in Los Angeles, California. The restaurant was a popular hangout for people who had immigrated from Hungary. Maria herself had fled from Soviet-occupied Hungary. While working at the restaurant, she met a man named Joe Barsi. Joe had also fled from Hungary. In the United States, Joe worked as a plumbing contractor. Maria first took notice of Joe because he always paid with $100 bills. They started dating and eventually got married. Maria gave birth to a daughter, Judith, on June 6, 1978. From an early age, Maria wanted her daughter to work in the entertainment industry. When Judith was 5 years old, a crew was making a commercial at a local ice rink and they saw her skating. Something about Judith caught the attention of the crew and she was hired to work on the commercial. It was the first of 72 commercials she would appear in. She also got acting roles in television productions. Her first television role was in the NBC miniseries Fatal Vision, which was broadcast in November 1984. Fatal Vision is based on the controversial true crime book of the same name. Fatal Vision details the complex Jeffrey MacDonald murder case. MacDonald, who was an army captain and physician, was convicted in August 1979 of the February 1970 murders of his pregnant wife and 2 young daughters. McDonald has always said he is innocent, and he says that a group of hippies committed the murders. In Fatal Vision, Judith played one of McDonald's daughters who was murdered. Judith continued to get roles in television series and made-for-TV movies. By the time Judith was 7, she was making over $100,000 a year. In 1985, her parents used some of her money to purchase a 3-bedroom house in West Hills. But things were far from idyllic in the household. Joe was an alcoholic with a violent temper, and he seemed to downright loathe his wife, Maria. He told several people he was going to kill her. He also said he might kill Judith and then himself and leave Maria alive to deal with the loss. Joe thought that Maria paid too much attention to Judith. Joe would also criticize Maria's housekeeping skills to anyone who listened to him rant about his wife. He would also take people on tours of the house and point out messes that Maria hadn't cleaned up. Joe didn't just abuse his wife. One time he pulled Judith around by her hair. Another incident was witnessed by a neighbor. Judith was flying a kite she had recently purchased. Joe came outside and grabbed the kite. Judith started crying and told him not to touch it because he would break it. Joe told the neighbor that Judith was a spoiled brat who couldn't share her new toy. Joe then proceeded to break the kite into pieces in front of Judith. In December 1986, Maria filed a police report. She said for the past 5 years, Joe had been abusing her. She said he had punched and choked her on several occasions. The police investigated the allegations, but they couldn't find any evidence to back up what Maria said, so no action was taken. Judith continued to get work on several popular television shows. This included Remington Steele, Punky Brewster, The Love Boat, St. Elsewhere, Growing Pains, and Cheers. Judith was small for her age, so she was often cast in roles of people younger than her actual age. While Judith's career was going well, she was miserable at home. She talked about how her dad was drunk every day and she knew he wanted to kill her mother. In early 1987, Maria and Judith were set to travel to the Bahamas. Judith had landed a role in Jaws: The Revenge, which is the 4th movie in the Jaws franchise, and they were filming in the Bahamas. Before they left for the Bahamas, Joe held a knife and told Judith she better come home or he was going to slit her throat. After they returned from the 2-month shoot, Judith's mental health got worse. She started pulling out her eyelashes and her cat's whiskers. In May 1988, Judith's agent realized how bad things had gotten. Judith was supposed to audition a song for an animated movie, but she couldn't perform because she was uncontrollably sobbing and she couldn't be consoled. The agent advised Maria to take Judith to a child psychologist. The psychologist reported the situation to Children's Services. Children's Services talked to Maria, but they didn't step in because Maria told them she had a plan, which included leaving Joe. Shortly after talking to Children's Services, Maria rented an apartment. She and Judith would spend their days there, and then they would return at night to live with Joe. Judith was cast to do voice work in 2 animated movies. Both were directed by Don Bluth, and they were being produced by Steven Spielberg's production company. One role was the character Ducky in The Land Before Time. The other film was All Dogs Go to Heaven. Judith provided the voice for the character Anne-Marie, who befriends the protagonist, a murdered dog who returns to Earth instead of going to heaven. On July 25, 1988, Judith had an appointment at Hanna-Barbera Productions Incorporated. When Judith didn't show up, her agent called the family's home. Joe answered the phone. He said that Judith and Maria had gotten into a big car and they went to San Diego. 2 days later, at about 8:30 a.m., a neighbor heard a gunshot come from the Barsi's garage. Then someone noticed that the Barsi's home was on fire. The fire became so intense that it blew out the windows in the house. Firefighters came and put the blaze out. Inside the home, they found a disturbing crime scene. The police were somewhat able to piece together what happened. 50-year-old Joe had shot his 10-year-old daughter, Judith, while she laid in bed. 48-year-old Maria may have gone to investigate the noise. Nevertheless, she was shot to death in the hallway outside of Judith's bedroom. It's believed that the murders happened on the morning of July 25, 1988, which was the day Judith missed the appointment at Hanna-Barbera. But the police also said it was possible that they were killed on July 26th. On the morning of July 27th, Joe, who was 50, poured an accelerant on their bodies and set them on fire. He then went into the garage and shot himself. The exact motive of the murders isn't known. Joe may have become angry over several things. For example, he may have found out that Maria was planning on leaving him, or he may have found out that Judith was seeing a psychologist. If Joe had a motive as to why he killed his family, he took that to his grave with him. The Land Before Time was released 4 months after Judith's murder. It was a box office hit and it spawned over a dozen sequels. All Dogs Go to Heaven, Judith's last role, was released a year later in November 1989. The movie's theme song, Love Survives, which plays over the ending credits, is dedicated to Judith Barsi. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it interesting, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos just like it. Also, if you are looking for something new to watch, why not check out my new channel, Chapter Dark. The videos are mysteries that you can try and solve. Do you have what it takes to solve these mysteries? You can find a link to Chapter Dark in the description box below. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.